Snap.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Youth Ministry Booster Podcast. Hanging out, you know, it gets cold sometimes, and I'm really thankful that we have a small heater here in the garage, but I'm even more thankful when I know that I'm sure the cold I'm facing is no near the sub-zero temperatures that our guest is facing. Jonathan Kornelsen, all the way from Canada, from the beach.
From Canada.
My friend.
Yeah.
How is the British Columbia? How are you today, my friend? We were talking about it today. Jonathan, how are you, my buddy?
You know, I'm living the life. It has been sunny the last few days. We're not like the cold temperatures like the prairies, so we're just like rainy and drizzly all the time. So we had sun yesterday.
Cold, wet.
We got cloud and
nice.
wet. Yeah.
Okay. We're almost we're riding around that zero degrees Celsius mark here in Oklahoma today. So we've had our Thanksgiving turkey, we've had our fill, and now the freeze has set in. And so I hope everybody turned their sprinklers off and covered their faucets because the cold is here.
But when you guys get snow, you guys cancel stuff, right? Like even just a little bit of snow.
We almost canceled today. There was enough precipitation coming down and then immediately melting on the roads that my 10-year-old son was like, "Well, they're going to cancel school, right?"
Oh.
And I'm like, "No, Bubba, they're not going to cancel school just because we saw snow." It's like we're groundhogs down here. If we see snow, we tuck tail and we can't. Yeah, y'all never cancel, I'm sure. You're like, "Hey, man."
Only when we get ice. When we get the ice. When we get the ice, then they cancel. But the snow, they pretty keep school going.
I like the snow.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, that typically is our issue. Is it comes down, it freezes overnight, and the next morning our one snowplow for a city of 1 million people just can't keep up. I mean, what were they gonna do? What were they gonna do?
100%.
So, well, Jonathan, happy American Thanksgiving to you. If you celebrate with pumpkin pie or stuffing or dressing or not, or a bowl of poutine for the celebration of the CFL championships. Or
That's right. Yeah, right.
Oh man. Would you help our guests know? So a little bit, I love our connection. We got to talk about Peter's milkshakes for those
Peter's
that,
Drive-In.
For those that know.
Calgary connection.
For the Calgarians. Come on.
So good.
Okay, so how did you end up in Canada, born, raised, transplant, otherwise, and then how did you end up on the best side of Canada?
Yeah. So I was actually born in Edmonton, Alberta, and I got out of there really quickly, and I got put into foster care. So that was a good reason to leave Edmonton. And I got adopted when I was 4.5, and I ended up in Chilliwack, and that's where I grew up, and where I was raised, and where my family is. And I love the community that I live in. We're about an hour and a half from Vancouver, and there was a time where I had left, and then I came back, and I was never wanting to be in Chilliwack, and then God just has a funny sense of humor that says, no, my plans are better than your plans.
Yes, we got roots here. I think we talked a little bit like it's quite the journey. A little stop off serving at your home church, because that's how God sometimes ordains it for those that speak pastorally and prophetically.
Yeah. I actually said no like 7 times. 7 times I said no, and God just made it really clear. I want you to be at the church you went to as a youth kid, and so it's so cool. Like I love sitting where we got to preach, and I remember like getting hit in the face, with a dodgeball in this room because it was a gym at the time. We converted to a youth center, and it's like, oh man, this is wild. It's just like it's pretty surreal. To see kids get baptized in the same tank that I got baptized.
That's awesome. Is there any JK graffiti in the men's room still, or have you had to paint over all of your old?
No. Yeah.
Tags.
Our building was a dump, and then we renoed. So any evidence is long gone, which is very good.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
we have erased the history of.
That's right. But it's weird when you actually go back to the church that you went to. Like all the elders were actually like former youth leaders, so they're like, so when you say John Kornelsen, do you mean that John Kornelsen? Because I was the loud kind of wild kid. Yes, it is. And I'm way better now. So take that, elders.
Do you have them like Clark Kented, where you put the spectacles on and you become Clark Kent to them, and they're just like, I don't even recognize this young man anymore.
Hidden identity. Yeah, 100%.
That's it. Yeah, he walks among us in plain sight. Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
But brother,
what a mystery
you've
he
been
is.
doing ministry for a while. Tell me a little bit, man. Like, I mean, almost two decades worth of serving and leading in youth ministry.
22 years.
What are some of the big things that you've just 22? Let's celebrate 22 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a Taylor Swift song in the making, I'm sure.
100%.
But what are some of the ways in which you've really seen that like grow and change in 22 years? I think that's something like for folks that are relatively new, it's hard to fully appreciate how much could or has changed in 20 plus years. But what are some of the things that you've noticed as real changes over the course of that time?
Oh, I think like youth ministry model, there was a day where you could have pizza and dodgeball, and you would have a killer youth group coming out, and you could talk about Jesus for 5 seconds, and then you move on to the next thing, and you have a huge youth group. And then like that ministry model has changed. Like it's not kids in Canada, or in our youth group anyways, they're not coming because our events are fun. They're coming because they want the word of God. They want truth in a world where truth is subjective, right? And so it's amazing to see what God's doing in the local church in Canada. We're seeing kind of like this silent revival. We've got kids who are running Bible school clubs in their schools, and like 120 kids are coming out. We actually have some kids that are doing a school district-wide worship night, and it's actually like part of the school district, which is very funny because our school district is very polarized when it comes to the left or the right, and some of the ideologies and beliefs. And so it's really cool. I mean, God's doing really cool things, and I look back those 22 years and I go, man, I wish back then we were where we are today, because it just seems like there's so much fruit that's coming out of ministry, right? Where you ran an event and it was like, hey, like a good group of kids came out, but what was the fruit that came from it?
Do you feel like there's a little bit of that as a theme of like some of the maybe the reach of the youth ministry happenings feels like it has reached less, and yet the fruitfulness is more? Do you feel like that's a fair evaluation or assessment of some of the youth ministry today? 'Cause I know that for some folks, they feel discouraged because it feels like 20 kids is the new 30 kids, and I'm behind the attendance metrics of the old log books that I found from 15 years ago. And yet, if you talk to anybody that's been in it for a while, there is a hint and an excitement of like, man, this seems like something fresh and new, and maybe even more passionate, or dare say like burgeoning revival that maybe even 10 years ago we didn't really know or experience.
Yeah, 1,000%. And again, like I just look at it and I go, we're in our youth ministry, like a huge part of what we're doing is equipping, right? And so we're equipping kids to lead worship. We're equipping kids to preach. We're equipping kids to be servant leaders, right? And I think that's just really, really cool because, back in the day, I think, even 22 years ago, being that youth pastor was really kind of like that superstar role a little bit, if you know what I mean, right? Like it was like, oh, you're on this pedestal. And I think so much of the ministries that are really healthy right now are the ones who are saying, hey, we're actually equipping kids, we're releasing kids, we're giving them that really big safety net that's going to protect them, but also allows them to like experience ministry. So we're seeing more students, actually step into vocational ministry than we did 20 years ago. We've got more kids going to Bible college than 20 years ago. And so these are just things that we celebrate and we go, man, God, you're so good. And, there's sometimes where you just go, it's hard to be a youth pastor. Like it's really hard to be a youth pastor in today's day and age with all the stuff that we have to deal with. And it's like, but we're called to this in a season and a time such as this so that we could actually equip these kids to continue the ministry.
That's good. What are some of the ways that you've pivoted or adjusted or recalibrated to be more equipping in that way? Are there things that you're doing differently now to adapt to that cultural or change of the age that we're in? How does ministry look different for what you can plan and control?
Yeah. I mean, so much of what I am doing is like, we're like multi-site. So my context is really dynamically challenging. We run 250 some events a year in our youth ministry across our campuses. And so for me, like, so much of what I have to do is that focus of like, okay, I can't be the guy. I have to find those students. I have to call those students. Like, I actually had a conversation with a kid who wants to go into the Army. And I'm like, dude, like, I gotta have a conversation before you hit the send button. Like, I love that you're doing this, even though we're Mennonite and we're pacifists. I love that you're wanting to serve. Like, I adore you for that. But do you think maybe God's calling you into ministry? And so I actually have to like be bold in identifying who those students may be and inviting them into ministry and say, actually, I see something that God is doing in you. Can I give you an opportunity? Can I give you, a shot? Like, I'll work with you in preparing a sermon and a talk. I know that you biblically, like, you got it, you understand it, you know the gospel, you can communicate that. Can I help you just do that for your peers? And so much what we have to do is like just this intent. It's not even a change in our program. Like, our program looks very similar, but it's about the intention and how we're working behind the scenes.
Well, I think that's one of the things that seems to be in the cultural moment is the shifting to more coaching of young people, whether that's the influence of the influencer culture or the spiritual self-help zeitgeist that we're in. But there is a lot of folks that are even more hungry for tell me what next steps could be. Like, whether it's the obsession with the gym or the obsession with growing as a person or capacity or skill set, like there seems to be whether it's entrepreneurial or just like an excitement of teenagers today, like, tell me what to do next. And I think there's a couple different ways to respond. One is to try to do that wholesale for everyone. There's a lot of folks that are trying to run some very like heavy curricular learning plan, almost like Bible seminary, college kind of stuff in their youth ministry, or adapting relationally to help, whether it's through yourself or through other leaders, to take this individuated, like, I'm going to help Mark, I'm going to help Eric, I'm going to help Stephanie in the ways in which their spiritual journey might have these next steps that they need to either be aware of or take. And so
well,
that's encouraging to hear. I do like the idea of like creating opportunity for them, even if they don't fully understand what the opportunity might be.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know what it was like in the States, but in Canada, there was like an assumed pathway, right? So the pathway was you grow up in the local church, and it was assumed that Christian kids go to college after high school, or they go to camp when they're teenagers, they go to college. My youth ministry class was like 35 people for year one, right? Our Bible college that we have about 40 minutes away from us, I think they got like 7 kids in the youth min this year, right? And so it's like that pathway is different. And so what we actually need to do as youth pastors is like raise up from within. And I think that the healthier the ministries are, they're ones that are focusing on, okay, I'm walking with this kid now for 6 years. How do I help them discover their giftings, their potential, invite them into that and give them opportunity? And I mean, my staff that I have, we've hired multiple staff. They're all former youth kids, and I love it. It's the best thing in the world because we've identified those giftings, given them opportunities, seen their hearts, seen their passion, see their love for Jesus, see the burden that they have for their peers. And we're like, hey, we'll give you that great environment where you can learn and grow and do really good ministry.
It is so interesting that so much of youth ministry today seems to have this like homegrown appeal, right? Like that most of the folks that have maybe previously shopped for youth ministers across town, across context, or plucked from the seminaries or Bible colleges are kind of raising their own and maybe like investing in them for seminary education on a hope of return. But it seems like there's very few folks on the waiver wire to do our fantasy football analogy for the moment. There seems to be more folks that are like already in the locker room that maybe just need the assignment. And I think that is something to hear you say is encouraging and confirming across multiple time zones for the ways in which that for folks looking for help, they may be already under the roof. They just don't have the right assignment or the challenging enough ask of what we're looking for them to do. So that's really powerful to hear.
And I think one of the things that we're seeing in Canada, I don't know with the States, but a lot of our churches, they're hiring a 2-year diploma. They're not hiring the 4-year degree. They're doing the diploma. And what we're finding is, I mean, it's that continual the cycle of youth pastor come, youth pastor go. That's still happening as much as it was before. And I think some of our ministries are actually more unhealthy because of that, right? There's just that cycle. Mm-hmm. And so part of what we have to do, especially churches that are structured, we're multi-site, we've got four campuses, I need lots of support, is raise up and release. And we've had some of our staff have moved on to other roles, and they look back and they're like, we're so thankful for that kind of incubator where they were able to grow, really learn, good ministry tools and practices, and now apply that in their new church, which is making their new church healthier. And so that's really cool. Like, that's just evidence of God's grace that's fun to be able to look and go, man, God, you're good. How you can, speak through me into a kid's life, and they can now do really good ministry because I'm John, right?
No, that's good. No, the church is cultivator. I mean, again, I think one of the things important in leadership always is to understand the metaphors in which we're operating. And church is cultivator is an important one, that if it is just the program that we have planned for students while they're here, we can fall into the event director, cruise director trap. Use the old youth ministry book slogans and stuff. We don't want to be that. We fall into it because we didn't have a better metaphor for what we're trying to do, which is why, my friend, I want to ask you a little bit. You've been doing a lot of research, some heavy lifting on some recent writings that you've done for the blueprints for youth ministry, and I want you to walk us through a little bit, like in your experience and in your expertise and research, what are some of the things that are most fundamental and critical for youth ministers today? Again, we're closing down 2025. We're looking to a bright 2026. What are some of the things that are the most structurally important for the ways in which we're building something? Because I do think youth ministry can suffer if it's not built well. I think we get a little too ramshackle, a little too quick fix, or maybe living week to week instead of considering the larger plan and structure. So for all the effort, energy, and research, Jonathan, help us, my friend. Guide us in a way that you could direct our next steps as we're building and leading.
Yes. Well, so as Zach said, I wrote a book called Youth Ministry Blueprint, and I was kind of the backstory was I went and got my master's through this amazing program called the Coalition for Youth Ministry Leadership, run by Youth Worker Community in Canada, and all the profs are like the Walt Muellers, Ginny Olson, Marv Penner. So some of these really amazing youth ministry legends were my profs, and I left that program with this conviction. I've been at my church now, I'm 15 years in. I know that I'm on the tail end of my ministry. I know that I've got less time than I have already had. And so I had this conviction, I got to leave my youth ministry healthier, because there will be a day when John Kornelsen is not at Central. But I also had this burden, we actually have to help the new youth pastors, the bivocational youth pastors, in establishing healthy ministries. So I kind of came up with 9 core convictions that represent the key stages of construction in a healthy youth ministry. Each conviction is more than a principle, it's this posture, and they form the foundation, the framework, the future of the ministry, so it doesn't just survive but thrives, especially in seasons of transition. That's really kind of what I was really focusing on, because we know that turnaround cycle happens all the time. And so some of those steps would be
it's inevitable. That's right.
It's inevitable, right? We're not the savior, right? We are the youth pastor who's going to come and go. We have a season, and one of the big
on
hiccups.
On a long enough timeline, we all move on.
Right, we all move on. But one of the things that we often do is we talk about it being our ministry. Right? This is our ministry. And it's actually, no, this is Jesus's ministry. And so I hold that so loosely, but also so tightly, because I hold it tightly because I actually get to lead this into a place of either, thriving or dysfunction. And at the same time, what I release is going to set that next person up for failure or for success. Like I could set my ministry up in such a poorly way that that when the new guy comes, the lead pastor's going to phone, the youth ministry expert and be like, this guy left nothing. What if we built our ministries in a way that actually was so full of structure?
Starting over.
We're starting over. But so many groups are doing that. They start over. We didn't know what the policies and procedures are. We didn't know, we're coming up with a new mission, vision, and priority statements. And so these 9 convictions would be this. Number 1, that you need to actually really define your mission, your vision, your priorities. This is your purpose, right? This is the foundation. Clarity before construction, right? If you don't define your purpose, your programs will eventually define it. And everything starts with this clear understanding of why you exist and what you're building towards, okay? Secondly, that we actually need to build a discipleship strategy and understand what our big wins are, right? So, I grew up in Doug Field's purpose-driven youth ministry. He said that there's 5 core things, right? Worship, discipleship, evangelism, service, and community or fellowship, right? I think those are still really important. Those are some of the metrics that we have to be looking at to determine if our ministry is healthy. What do I want to accomplish in worship? What do I want to accomplish in my evangelism or my discipleship, right? What do I want my community to look like? Right? Because what I'm going to build is either going to be healthy or it's going to crumble when I leave. Right? The third thing is that we actually need to strengthen the foundation. And this is really at the heart of it is just spiritual renewal for leaders, right? Our ministries are only as healthy as you and I are in our relationship with the Lord, right? And our spiritual health never exceeds the personal health of its leader, right? A ministry spiritual health will never exceed the personal health of its leaders. And so part of what I want to do is just go like, how are you doing?
Just to help double down on, friend, like that's a bold claim. That's a bold claim for a lot of folks that are trying to push their ministry ahead of them instead of lead or pull. And I think that's a pivotal metaphor, that it's like the bar you set for what you hope to do is not launch shot or boom shot off of what you have done, but rises to the capacity that you have cultivated in your own honesty, integrity, character, and leadership. Yeah. And I think for a lot of folks, they're thinking that like, well, I'm the springboard for the ministry, instead of understanding and taking to heart what that leader role might actually look like.
Well, and so much of it too, right, is like, I can't lead students further than I've been myself. I loved yesterday after church, I took some of our young adults out for lunch and we were just talking, and there's some debate going on about, ministry models and why we do church a certain way. And one of the guys who's just he's a little cynical sometimes, he just goes, "Hey, John, I just am so thankful for your faithfulness. I know that you love the Lord. I see it. It has inspired me to love the Lord and to ask questions and to dig deep." And I just go, man, I just kind of just sat like just so encouraged, like, okay, am I perfect? No. But am I really taking steps forward so that I can set that example of what a life of faithfulness and ministry looks like, right? And people notice that. People notice how we live our lives. And so spiritual renewal's leader or spiritual renewal for leaders is important, right? We need to ask questions how we're doing with our heart, soul, mind, strength, body, because that's how God's created us to be. The next thing that I talk about in my book is this idea of like leader onboarding and training. I think so many of our ministries, we struggle because we never have enough help. And so we throw the leader in quickly. We don't set up clear expectations for what they should be doing. And then they're left going, I don't want to be here. You threw me in with grade 6 boys. What the heck? I am not a babysitter, right? And so we actually have to do a really good job.
Please eject. Please, I want out.
Right. Please, can I tap out? Someone else come in, right? And that's not healthy. That's not healthy for your ministry. And so to be, really clear what our culture and our pipeline is, where our leaders are equipped and supported and unified around a shared mission. And that like effective youth ministry actually depends on a unified team that's all pulling in the same way and knows what we're doing, because that's how we actually multiply impact. In the book, we talk about designing the elements of an effective youth ministry. And this would be kind of like the construction of programs and ministry environments that align with your mission. But those look different for every church. And so part of what you have to do as you're building is really know your context, know your church, there's some churches that are like, okay, Awana, I don't know if you guys know what Awana is. It's a Canadian.
Oh,
yeah,
come on.
Okay.
Puggles unite. Yeah.
So much tape on the carpet. So much tape. Much
multicolored and also very specific tape. Yes.
Very specific. It
3M be blessed.
Does not peel well. And so part of it is like, how do we design our programs to not just be a calendar that's full, but actually missional, that's forming disciples, not consumers. We talk about in the book just how you plan for events, because I think excellence honors God and inspires people. And so how do we do that well? Planning and executing youth events. Like I have had so many youth nights. I remember one of my first youth nights, I was an intern, and my buddy Dave, he was the youth pastor. He said, "Hey, John, I want you to lead a Bible study." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll lead a Bible study." And about 5 minutes later, the Bible study was done. We had an hour and 25 minutes of just hanging out because I wasn't actually prepared. And he came back. He's like, "Hey, John, dude, that was rough, man. Like, you didn't even have snack." And so I was like, "Hey, I got a whole bunch of apple cider left over from my wedding. It's sitting beside the furnace. Maybe I should bring that and get rid of it." Well, it had turned, and luckily some leaders had found that. And so, those things that you learned early in ministry, right? But so much of what I think youth pastors or youth workers, because of the complexities of youth work, like we fly by the seat of our pants. And so we're pulling things together last minute. When we've got a game, we're scrambling to find the pool noodles because we didn't actually put those out in time, and so how do we do that? How do we make sure that our programs are just excellent, because they actually reflect, and honor God in our excellence. And so not that our program is everything, but what we do is done well. It's thought through. It's been prayed over. We're wise in our building. And then we talk about two other things. We talk about what it is to set a stage for an authentic community. We so long for students to find a place of belonging in the church. How do we actually form that community? How do our small groups play a factor in that? How do we create a welcoming culture where students actually feel seen, known, and valued? And how do we shape that ministry environment both physically and relationally so that belonging becomes the soil where faith can actually grow? And then we talk about this idea of that ongoing maintenance, right? Why the work is never done. And throughout this book, you're going to have a ton of different assessments, SWOT analysis, things that will just make you pause and go, okay, how are we actually doing? Because I could look at a youth night, and I have like 250 kids that may come to my youth night. I'm like, hey, that's super great. Numbers are awesome. They are an indication of health at times, but if that's the sole thing, then we're actually missing it. So how do I actually pause in the midst of the busyness and just take time to assess where we actually are, and to go back to that mission, vision, and priorities and say, this is where we want to be going. How are we actually doing with that, right? It's that pause and go. I remember going on so many road trips with my mom and dad, and my mom would have a map out, and my dad would be yelling at her because she would get the directions wrong. And my dad never wanted to stop because we were always rushed. I think sometimes we have to stop and actually look at the map that we have laid out, to use a different metaphor, obviously. So, yeah. So that's some of the things that my book talks about.
That's great, man. Well, and again, I think the thoughtfulness, because ministry can get caught in the I have to get this week and next week and the week after, and the bigger view of what we're actually trying to build and do that would outlast both the week that is now and the time that will be there, the 2 to 10 to 15 years, is a careful, thoughtful, and maybe even sometimes methodical work that is part of what it means to lead. And I think that's one of the things that's so important. And it's one of the things, and this is kind of the question I want to ask you to kind of wrap up some of our time, is we can't do it all. And so if we're trying to pave next steps for a hopeful 2026 and for the things and beyond, like what is enough of a thing that you would say, man, put some handles on this, double down on this, invest in this, because it does feel like a lot at once. And yet it is those careful little decisions like having a tidy storage room so that when a game calls for supplies, you have a ready-made room that has the stuff that you need, and you aren't just hoping you had 3 noodles left in the trunk of your car from the last time you did this. Or it's the having the stuff documented well enough that when we talk about the importance of worship and discipleship, that we actually have some things marked down. So when we meet with Eric or with Stephanie or with Mark, we actually have like conversation notes that extend beyond just the thing that they shared last week. Because I think a lot of ministry gets stuck when it lives in the, I don't know, man, the smallest iteration of the last time that we talked. Like if we could help them see growth over time, that comes from careful planning on us and not just their better memory. And so, man, what are some of those things as you work through this and would encourage folks, if someone was leading in their ministry for next year, of the 9 convictions, or maybe something that's even cropped up new for you, what would you point people to as like, man, I think this matters more than anything else right now?
Mm-hmm. I think you look at Scripture, and throughout Scripture you see these examples of a way of building ministry. So just a few kind of off the top of my head. Nehemiah has to build a wall, okay? But before he built that wall,
that's it. He's got to build a wall.
He's got to build a wall. But he didn't grab the hammer.
He's got to do it. He's got to do it. Yeah.
He didn't grab the hammer and go for it. He started with prayer. He assessed the situation. He cast a clear vision, organized his teams, executed with strategy. And when pressure started coming in, he was okay. He's like, it's okay. This is what we're doing. We're doing this for God. We're rebuilding the kingdom, right? In Jerusalem. You look at Moses here, Moses is given the blueprints for how to build a tabernacle. He didn't just, God didn't just say, hey, Moses, make it however you feel like. He gave details, materials, measurements, colors, roles, because the structure represented something sacred. And I think sometimes in youth ministry, we're like, hey, it's youth ministry. But we have to remember, what we're doing is the most sacred thing in the whole wide world, right? It's so sacred. We are given the biggest spiritual window in the life of a student, right? More kids come to faith before the age of 18. We're given it and we just wing it, right? And I remember my first ministry role. I got fired 10 months in, so I did a really poor job of that. But when I left, it was
the
very
things
much
we learned that helped fill a book. That's right. That's right.
Right. Thank you, Lord, for that hard season.
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
Yes.
Hard to say then. More 100%. Now. That's right.
Hated it. But when I had my exit interview, which is the most intimidating thing, by the way, because it's like, how did I fail? And they'll just be honest with you. It's like you didn't build properly.
But maybe
right?
one of the most important moments, right?
100%.
One of the most important moments.
100%. You look at the Apostle Paul, right? Here he is building churches, right? And not just churches, healthy churches. He didn't just preach and move on. He built systems of leadership and structure that sustained churches long after he was gone. And so there is this, the big tension with youth ministry is we step into it, we think it's just fun and games, and we got to talk about Jesus with kids, but we have to remember there's organizational structure. And sometimes we lean one way or the other, and there's no really in between. And so it's like you actually got to find that in between, which is part of the reason why I wrote the book, is I wanted to help you find the in between. But the last thing is that Jesus actually built disciples, not crowds. Right? And I think that's such an important thing for us to remember. It doesn't matter how big our youth group is. That doesn't indicate health, right? What indicates health is how is the person being formed into a disciple of Jesus. I love the youth groups that have 15 kids because they can be so intentional with their discipleship. But the question is, are they actually going to be intentional, right? I know lots of youth pastors who will go on a missions trip and I'll be like, hey, so what are you doing discipling? And they're like, oh, dude, I love mission trips. I get to go. We go with an organization. The organization does everything, and I just get to hang out with kids. Well, I think that's how a lot of people view ministry. I just get to hang out with kids. No, you get to make disciples of Jesus. Jesus, in Luke 6:12-13, went to a mountain and prayed. And then he chose the 12 whom he named the apostles, right? And I think so much of what we have to do as youth pastors is actually stop, look at the examples that are given to us, and then from there, slowly and methodically and intentionally build a ministry. Now, the cool thing is this, is that I've been at my church 15 years. If I would step into my context right now, 15 years ago as multi-site, I would get my butt kicked. But we grew from a really small youth group. We were like 13 senior high kids, 25 junior high kids. And it was like this slow, being able to apply some of these things. And we get to look at where we are now. And I celebrate because God gave me this vision that one day we would have a room full of kids worshiping Jesus, right? It wasn't just a room full of kids having fun, is that they were worshiping Jesus and transforming the city that we live in. And so we actually get to start seeing that. And I, as the youth pastor who's been 15 years, I get to sit back and not be the guy always in the spotlight. And I just get to marvel at what God's doing. And it's actually like, I did the hard work. So ministry is actually easier now because I did all that hard work that's before. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I really think just that we have to, if you're in youth ministry and you're like, are we actually accomplishing something? I think you just need to stop and pause and start assessing and start looking at how, there's biblical examples of building and follow those things so that we could actually build healthy ministries. And again, we are building what matters most. This is the coolest thing ever, the biggest spiritual window. But we can't mess it up. We have to take this as the prime opportunity to lead kids to know who Jesus is, to help them discover. I mean, in our context is we're the pin of the Bible Belt in the Fraser Valley. A lot of people go to church. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of people go to church.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, actually, are you just checking the boxes and saying you're a Christian, or are you loving Jesus and allowing him to form you in your character and in your attitude and how you deal with your parents and all those things, right? Like, how's Jesus transforming your life? Because that's the indication of healthy ministry.
Good. Well, John, thank you so much for sharing and encouraging in that word, because I do think it's critical. No one's going to give you the window to assess unless you take it. One of the things that's critical in this season of ministry, the turning of a year, the turning of a new season, maybe starting at a new church or leading in a new way, is to have the careful season of assessment in the ways in which we are trying to gather up a vision for the bigger picture. It would be great to talk about the ways in which we get to hang out with kids, and it's one of the most fun and exciting things we get to do in youth ministry, but to not slough off the intentional, sacred, important work that it actually is, and hold ourselves and invite others to it. Let's not belittle the sacred window that we're in that's formative in the lives of teenagers, but invite others to the journey. So, Jonathan, I know a lot of great writers are also readers. So what are some things that you've been reading and challenged by to encourage us with thinking about? What are you working on next, thinking about and doing?
Like what I'm personally reading? Or what I'm working.
What's challenging you these days? Yeah, people want to know. What are things that are challenging, pushing you?
I've been actually just listening to a ton of podcasts. So every opportunity that I have, I think I've listened to most of yours. Okay. I've listened to a whole bunch of the Download Youth Ministry ones, and I think for me, like I have actually some like intellectual disabilities where it's hard to read sometimes, and so listening tends to be really a really beneficial way for me to retain information. But one of the ones that I'm just reading right now is The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen. That just for me has just been that great reminder of my own posture, of my own heart, of where I am, of those moments where I walk away and wander from the Father. And so some of that's the personal stuff. And there's just a ton of just really great, like there hasn't been a lot of new great youth ministry books out, but I am still going to some of those older ones, reading Chap Clark's Hurt book right now, and that's just super beneficial just because we're walking with a lot of kids who are struggling, and and we're trying to get some good resources also to those families. So
Well, John, if folks want to follow up more, Youth Ministry Blueprint is the book, but how do they find you, contact, and keep up with what you have going on next?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram at Youth Ministry Blueprint. You can also go to Amazon and order that book. It's like $29.50 in Canada, so it's going to be cheaper in American prices. But I think that that's actually a killer deal because the amount of assessments and tools that you're going to be given is unbelievable, and we want to make it cost effective because we recognize that not every church has a wonderful big budget.
Well, John, thank you so much, my friend. As always, thank you for your work in ministry, your friendship beyond the microphone and the platform, and the ways in which you message, text, and encourage. And brother, peace to you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.